major delays and cancellations already impacting record holiday travel. Plus, the verdict in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, what the jury decided. World News Tonight with David Muir is the #1 newscast in America.
Right now on ABC News Live, a stunning end to the sex trafficking and racketeering trial of Sean Diddy Combs after the jury reached a split verdict. More on the charges he was found guilty of as we await for the rap mogul's bail hearing to get underway. And plus, the accused killer in the Idaho College murders pleads guilty to all counts, sparing him of the death penalty. What comes next for Brian Kohberger? And the House races to pass President Trump's mega bill despite some deep divisions amongst Republicans. The latest on the measure and what it means for the president's agenda. ABC News Live Reports starts right now. Good afternoon. I'm Alex Perche in our nation's capital, and we begin with breaking news. Right now, we are awaiting the bail hearing of Sean Combs to get underway. And if the judge grants his release, Combs is likely to get out of jail later today. The government is seeking to keep him in custody until his sentencing. And all of this comes after the jury reached a split verdict earlier today, finding him guilty of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution in connection with his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, an ex-girlfriend who testified under the pseudonym Jane. Combs was found not guilty of racketeering conspiracy, the most serious charge, and those 2 counts of sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. As the jury left the courtroom, Combs clasped his hands in front of his chest and mouthed, "Thank you." Combs turned in his seat to his family and said, "I'm coming home, baby. I'm coming home." And he also kneeled on the ground and appeared to pray briefly after the jury was out of the room. ABC News' Rena Roy is live outside the courthouse there in Lower Manhattan for us. And Rena, what are we expecting from this bail hearing?
Well, Alex, the hearing has been scheduled for 5 o'clock. It is now 5:01 on the dot. We are hearing it's going to get started any moment now. We know prosecutors, they have arrived in the courtroom at this hour. And the family also just arrived to court a couple of moments ago. There's just a massive crowd here waiting to see what happens. As we know, Combs has been held by federal authorities since September of last year when he was arrested. But we could see him potentially walk out of those golden doors here tonight if the judge rules in his favor. All day, the defense and the prosecution, they put together their cases for and against his release. Prosecutors say that he is a flight risk. They say that he is a danger and that he should be held until his sentencing. But the defense is saying it's inappropriate to hold him. They say that he needs and wants to go home to his family. And they've brought up several reasons for that, including the fact that his mother, Janice Combs, who we've seen in court here almost every day of this trial, she is 85 years old. She lives near him in Florida. She wants him to be her caretaker, apparently. He also has children, they say, including a 3-year-old that he needs to take care of. So we'll have to see how this all plays out. Again, it's going to get started any moment now, Alex.
Well, and Rena, we were just looking behind you. There's that black Sprinter van. We've seen the family of Diddy get out of a similar Sprinter van. I don't know if that's the same vehicle. But look, I mean, if he is released today, how would that work?
So there are a couple of different options that we could see play out if he is released. And again, that's a big if. We have to see how the judge rules, how he weighs the different arguments here. Like I mentioned, we could see him walk right out of those golden doors here at the federal courthouse in Manhattan, where we have, at this point, dozens and dozens of reporters and onlookers waiting to see what happens. Or he could be sent back to MDC Brooklyn. That's where he's been held behind bars. We could see him sent back there to fill out some paperwork and go through some of the proceedings there before he's actually released until his sentencing, Alex.
Well, and Rena, you've been outside that courthouse all day. I'm curious, I mean, what has the mood been like, especially since his verdict was rendered?
Well, we've really seen a mix of people out here, a lot of characters who are celebrating or lamenting this decision. And you can hear people are honking as they come by. I think that's actually the family Sprinter van that you mentioned that's pulling out. The family just got here. So there's been a lot of commotion, you can probably tell. It's a busy New York City street, so there's people just coming by to see what's going on. But there are also people who have been here since the beginning. Some of them have been chanting, "Let Puff go," ahead of this hearing. Again, we are standing by and waiting to see see how this all unfolds.
All right, Rena, thank you for that. And for more on this verdict, I want to bring in ABC News legal contributor and criminal defense attorney Bernarda Villalona, along with ABC News contributor and senior entertainment reporter for ESPN's Anscape, Kelly Carter. And Bernarda, I want to start with you. Walk us through the process of a bail hearing.
Yeah, so in terms of what the judge has to decide, the judge has to see whether the defense, by clear and convincing evidence, can prove to this judge that Sean Combs is not a flight risk and that he doesn't pose a danger to any particular person or to the community. Of course, what the prosecution is arguing, that there has been a change in circumstance in the sense that it's no longer alleged that he committed transportation to engage in prostitution, but instead that now a jury of his peers has convicted him of that. So that is a change in circumstance. But you also have that competing narrative from the defense that says, look, you held him in custody pending trial based on the highest charge of racketeering, of RICO conspiracy, and sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, which carried a mandatory minimum of 15 years or up to life. Being that there's a change in circumstance and that a jury of his peers has found him not guilty of those highest charges, that he should be released, especially when you take into account that there is no mandatory minimum of a sentence of having to deal with the transportation to engage in prostitution. There's also a competing narrative in terms of what is the criminal guidelines, the guideline sentence as to what Sean Combs is facing. The defense is saying that the guidelines is 21 to 27 months. We know that Sean Combs has only been in custody since September, so I believe it's only 10 months that he's been in custody. The prosecution is saying that the guidelines is recommending 51 to 63 months incarceration. Of course, all the time that he served, he'll get credit for that. But now you have something else that has been poured into the mix, in the sense that Doug Wigdor, the attorney for Cassie Ventura, submitted a letter to this judge and saying that if you release Sean Combs, he is going to be a threat to the safety of Cassie Ventura and that he should remain in custody pending sentence. We can get some insight as to where the judge is leaning in terms of a sentence if he chooses to keep Sean Combs in custody, because in his mind he may be saying, like, look, you're going to do more than 10 months, so let's keep you in custody because that's where I'm leaning. He's not going to say that on the record, but that is something to glean.
Well, and Kelly, you can't talk about hip hop without mentioning Diddy. Right. And so I'm curious, after this verdict, how is the hip hop community reacting to this?
Yeah, you know, I've said it before and I'll say it again. The silence has been incredibly loud since Cassie first released that really explosive civil suit in 2023. And I feel like what we probably saw primarily happening is that people were really taking a wait and see attitude. They wanted to see what happened with this case. But I think because of the testimony that we've heard and because of that 2016 footage from the Intercontinental Hotel incident, it's going to be really difficult for people who have a very similar platform, who have amplified platforms like Sean Combs, to speak in support of him, which is probably why we've heard silence for the most part. We have heard from a few people, 50 Cent, who has been one of the only people who has been talking throughout the entirety of this case, you know, making a comment. We've heard from Rosie O'Donnell, we've heard from Kesha, but it's been really silent, I think, in the aftermath of this. We've only kind of seen what the public has said, and the court of public opinion is really mixed right now.
Well, and Bernarda, as his defense team petitions for his release on bond, we've heard the mentioning of his mother, his 85-year-old mother, who wants him to be her caretaker. We've heard the mention of a 3-year-old child. How does that play in the judge's calculations here?
So interestingly enough, those factors right there are going to be taken into account when it comes to sentencing, but not specifically given much weight when it comes to detention awaiting sentencing. So yes, the judge will listen to what the defense has to say, but it's not going to be heavily determined on being the caretaker for his mother as well as for that 3-year-old child, because in the end, the judge has to take into account his risk of flight, but also protecting the public. Is he a danger to public safety or to any other victims. He has to take into account the public good when making this determination as to whether he should be released pending sentence. Again, he's been convicted now, so that sentence that he's going to face ultimately carries much more weight than releasing him pending sentence.
Well, and Kelly, listen, now that a potential life sentence is essentially taken off the table, there will be a day, presumably, where Diddy will be free and out and about in the public as well. And so I'm curious, given his career and also given this trial, what does this mean for his legacy? Is there room for him to reemerge in the industry?
So much remains to be seen. I mean, we have seen him rehabilitate himself and remix, to kind of use a word that is synonymous with the work that he's done himself over the years. I don't know that would necessarily apply here. I personally don't see him necessarily returning to the industry that he left. And most certainly, I don't see him returning to it in the way that he had before. Remember, he was kind of this unofficial king of like the Met Gala, just the biggest and best and boldest kind of events across all industries. I don't see him returning to that life again in the aftermath of this trial and of these two guilty verdicts.
Well, and the other thing that strikes me, I'm curious because, as they're considering his sentencing here, they've said that he has no criminal record, but this isn't Diddy's first run-in with the law, right? I mean, there was that 1999 alleged incident with Steve Stout, another one alleged incident in 2015 at UCLA involving a kettlebell. Everyone remembers, and he wasn't charged in this, but there was certainly the high-profile incident that night. Him and J-Lo were at a nightclub, and there was a shooting. But what's different about where we are right now as a society, and also what's different specifically about this case?
Well, I mean, I think that we've learned so much. We've put language to things that we probably didn't have language to back in 1999 when it comes to talking about, sexual assault of women. And so I think that has happened. I think we're far more educated about that now. But I think when this case in particular, this is the first time we've gotten these really intimate details, lots and lots of details about his personal life that we would have never guessed, were happening. And I think that is probably going to live in people's minds for a number of years, and ultimately will play a role in how we view Sean Combs, his legacy, and also his ability to work past whatever the incarceration might look like for these charges.
We were just told by our team that Sean Combs has walked into that courthouse there in Lower Manhattan. He greeted supporters. He was smiling. But Bernarda, as we wait for these proceedings to get underway, this verdict doesn't mean that he is out of the legal woods just yet, right? I mean, he's still on the hook for those civil suits.
Yeah, so while he's out of the woods criminal-wise, he still has those civil lawsuits. However, it's important to know when you're talking about civil lawsuits, you're talking about money. So he's out of the woods in the sense of that his liberty is no longer at stake. Probably his financial status is at stake, but not his liberty. Also important to remember that when we're talking about those civil lawsuits, while he may have escaped criminal liability, the burden of proof is completely different when it comes to civil lawsuits. It's by preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not, 51% to 49% of whether he's liable on those counts that the lawsuit is based on, as opposed to in the criminal world, it was beyond a reasonable doubt. So we may likely see a different outcome on those lawsuits, but hey, he's ready for war. He beat the war in terms of this criminal case, and that was most important.
Well, and Bernarda, given your expertise, I mean, it seemed like as a defendant, he was really prepped to be found guilty on something, right? Because, hearing the three most severe charges, those not guilty verdicts coming down, you see his reaction. You see him thanking the jury. You see him with that message to his family, "I'm coming home, baby," and then appearing to bow and pray as the jury is out of there. And so I'm curious, from a defense stance, how was he prepped? How was he likely prepped going into this second day of a verdict?
So his defense team, and remember, we're dealing with more than one attorney. You're dealing with about 6 attorneys that has been on his side and have been on his side, especially Mark Agnifilo and Tenny Garagos have been on his side since day one. And they've been in constant contact, seeing him, talking to him since the first day and preparing him for this day to face this verdict and giving him ammunition to be like, keep your head up, that we're going to fight with you. We are with you. We're going to do our best. If something were to happen and you were to be found guilty, we've prepared this record for appeal, so we'll take it up to a higher court to appeal the conviction. So they prepared him either way it was going to turn out and kept his hopes high from the very beginning.
Well, and Kelly, you know, I'm curious because you have great context here, especially whenever it comes to music and entertainment and in the world of hip hop. You know, how would you equate this? I mean, is this a similar fall from grace as a Russell Simmons? Where does this chart?
I would venture to say this is far bigger, you know, for a number of reasons. And I think to start, you know, you have to acknowledge that Sean Combs truly is a cultural icon. You know, 30 years in the making, he has been a presence in not only hip hop, but he expanded hip hop, not just for himself, but for the entirety of the business. He helped to, you know, turn this into a multi-billion-dollar business. He helped to commercialize hip hop, and he also took hip hop outside of the community into spaces that the genre never imagined it to go to, from politics, which was very huge. The Vote or Die campaign was very significant, and he was leading the charge for that. You have the world of spirits. Forbes 500, you know, list was something that I don't think anyone in hip hop ever aspired to do before, you know, Sean Combs really kind of laid it out that something like that was possible. So this is absolutely significant because he really has been a representation, not only for hip hop, but also for Black excellence and for his story to kind of be where it is right now, I think is colossal. And it's something that we now have to have part of the conversation when we talk about all the things that he's done.
Yeah, it is actually pretty remarkable because when you talk about, you know, the spans of his career from music and then kind of transitioning into fashion, and then, you know, I think in later years, or most folks have kind of come to know him through his promotion of Ciroc. He certainly have seen other rappers and entertainers who have gotten into the spirit industry, which has boomed since then, and he was kind of like the originator there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he, you know, the thing about Sean is that he is an incredible marketer. And I think he really showed other people, both contemporaries and people coming up behind him, how to really take advantage and how to market, you know, the product of themselves, because he was a master, you know, at doing that, is a master at doing that. And I think he really showed a lot of people behind him and also people who were standing alongside him how to really do that and kind of function in this world of you know, high industry.
Sure. And we just got word that the judge has taken the bench, so we're expecting these proceedings to get underway momentarily. But Bernarda, if I may, you know, just breaking down the context of just how big of a trial this is. You know, when you have a household name like Diddy, and the process by which, you know, even fielding a jury in a place like Manhattan where everyone knows him. I mean, you know, this was a huge undertaking.
Oh, absolutely. This was a huge undertaking by the prosecution to actually go after Sean Diddy Combs. I was in the courtroom for pretty much every day of this trial, and you always felt the weight of who Sean Combs was in that courtroom, whether he spoke or didn't speak. People knew who he was and would take that into consideration no matter what anyone actually said. But in terms of sitting a jury, look how many jurors they had to go through. I mean, it was hundreds of jurors that they had to go through to be able to select a jury of 12 plus 6 alternates.
Well, and Bernarda, we have some breaking news right now. The judge has denied bail for Sean Combs. That's what I'm hearing from our team. The judge has denied bail, so he will remain in custody between now and sentencing. More to come on this, but the hearing and news that we were waiting for this afternoon, whether or not Sean Diddy Combs would receive bail, his bail has been denied. Bernarda, in just getting that news, I'm curious your initial reactions. Did it surprise you?
I am not surprised that this judge denied Sean Combs' release pending sentencing. You have to think that this judge is in a different position than when he first heard the bail application when Sean Combs was first arrested, because this judge has sat throughout the entire trial and has heard all the evidence that was submitted before this jury and evidence that was not submitted before this jury. So he has such a huge insight as to who Sean Combs is. Also taken into account that he knows what the guidelines are. And those guidelines, even if you take it from the perspective of the defense of 21 to 27 months, or you take it from the prosecution, whether it's over 50-something months, he's going to sentence him at least within those guidelines and not the 10 months that he's already served.
I think I just saw Aaron Katersky walk out of the courtroom, our chief investigative correspondent. Kelly Carter, your initial reactions to hearing that the bail has been denied for Diddy?
You know, I also am not surprised, too. I mean, one thing we haven't talked about is, in large part at least, are the people who wrote letters to the judge before he took the bench, you know, imploring him to keep Sean in custody. Not only Cassie, but also Deontay, who is the fashion stylist that was hired by Sean Combs and Cassie and who testified in here, imploring and asking for him not to release him out of custody. And I don't know if those letters, you know, bared, any weight on the judge's decision, but my initial reaction is they may have very well done that exactly.
And I mean, you think about Cassie's testimony in particular, in many have said that she was the prosecution's star witness in this case, and certainly the one that the public was most familiar with as that tape that leaked from that alleged assault that took place in that hotel leaked out. But when you talk about like her testimony and her process through this.
I have no.
Actually, Kelly, stick with me for just a second. I want to swing this to Rena Roy, who is outside the courthouse there in Lower Manhattan as this news has been trickling out. Rena, what can you tell us more about the judge's decision here?
Well, Alex, we are getting some information in real time from our teams inside the courthouse at this hour. We're told that almost immediately after the judge took the bench, he announced that the bail was denied. Now, keep in mind, this was just a couple of hours after we saw Combs celebrating in the courtroom, looking at his family, saying that he was coming home. He said, "I'm coming home, baby. I'm coming home." But it looks like that is not the case at this hour. Now, as this hearing got underway, though, we are told that Combs had a big smile on his face. He was hugging his defense attorneys, and prosecutors, they were also smiling. So it seems like overall pretty joyous. Of course, the mood probably switched as soon as this news came in from the judge. Prosecutors argued that this is a violent man who should not be released. And Cassie Ventura, the star witness for the prosecution, her lawyer said that she felt that he posed a danger if he were to be released. The defense, however, argued that it would be inappropriate to hold him, saying that he needs to be home with his family, Alex.
Well, yeah, that letter from Cassie, I read it. It was very, very powerful. But, Diddy is a man that has means and certainly access. He has a plane. I know that it's his defense has said that, he has a family and that the consequences of him fleeing would be greater than, the time that he's likely to serve here. I'm curious, Rena, has the crowd there behind you started to react to this news?
Well, I think everybody was waiting for this news to come out, and as it did, we heard a few cheers there. It looks like people are waiting for his family to come out once again as well. They have been waiting all day, watching them go in and out of the courthouse. You can see that the barricades there are just full of media, bloggers, reporters, and onlookers. There are people here that are very interested in seeing how this would all unfold. Of course, we just learned a few minutes ago that this bail has been denied. Combs will be held until his sentencing date, which we are still waiting to hear when that will be.
Yeah, and obviously the situation is developing, but we're getting more notes from inside that courtroom. Our team telling us that Combs looked to both of his lawyers as the judge read the decision His head was largely down, though he was occasionally whispering to one of his attorneys. The district judge there said that detention is required based on Combs's conviction. He did not hear any arguments from the lawyers, he had been as he read his decision from the bench there. But I want to go back to Kelly Carter, who I believe is still with us. Actually, before that, we're going to go to a special report with Whit Johnson.
This is an ABC News special report.
I'm Whit Johnson in New York. We're coming on the air right now because the federal judge in the Sean Diddy Combs trial has just denied bail for Combs hours after a split verdict in the racketeering and sex trafficking case against him on the third day of deliberations. The jury finding Combs not guilty on 3 of 5 counts, acquitting him of the most serious charges of racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking. Combs guilty on 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Each count carries a maximum of up to 10 years behind bars. The verdict considered a huge win for Combs, who is facing the possibility of life in prison. He's been behind bars since his arrest in September. Let's get right to ABC's chief investigative correspondent Aaron Katersky. And Aaron, we know that the defense was hoping that Combs would be able to leave the courtroom and go back to his family today. And earlier he even said to his family there that I'm coming home. But it turns out that that is not the case. What are you learning from what happened in this hearing late today?
Sean Combs entered court just a moment ago, Whit, looking upbeat. He greeted his family, who crammed into the gallery, all in one bench, his mother, sons, twin daughters. And I think he was anticipating that he would be released following the mixed verdict, especially the acquittal on all of the violent crimes. But the judge immediately sat down at the bench, started reading his decision, saying bail is denied. He would not be released prior to sentencing because the judge said his incarceration is required based on what he was convicted of, transportation for the purposes of prostitution. The judge said the defense did not make any successful arguments to say that that expectation should be overridden.
All right, Aaron Katersky, thank you. Stand by for us a moment. You're taking a look at some of these live images from our WABC New York chopper camera here. You can see the crowd gathering outside the courthouse. A lot of people were hoping, people who were waiting there outside the courtroom, to be able to get a glimpse of Sean Diddy Combs as he was released. But again, that news coming down that he will not be released on bail for now. Let's bring in ABC News legal contributor Bernarda Villalona. And Bernarda, we know that this case was not technically about domestic violence. At least those were not the charges against Combs. But of course, there was that now infamous video from the hotel surveillance that showed him physically assaulting Cassie Ventura. Is it possible that any of that evidence came down to what the judge was considering in terms of his release back to the public on bail?
100%, absolutely. You have to think that this judge is in a unique position that he heard all of the testimony, all of the evidence that was provided through this 7-week trial. He also knows of evidence that wasn't submitted before this jury. So he took into account what he actually heard. He took into account that it's no longer that Sean Combs is accused of transportation to engage in prostitution, but now that he has been convicted by a jury of his peers. He took into account that his ability to flee and not return for sentencing, as well as that he's a danger to the community and also to victims. Remember that Cassie Ventura's attorney, Doug Wigdor, submitted a letter to this court requesting that Sean Combs remains in custody because he is a danger to society. So taking all of that into account, in addition to what his potential sentence would be, does give us a cue into what he will actually sentence him to. While it's a mandatory of 10 years on each of these counts, there is a sentencing crime guidelines, and the prosecution is claiming that it's about 51 months to 63 months, while the defense is saying 21 months to 27 months, and Sean Combs has only been in custody for 10 months.
Bernarda, thank you. We are just getting this information from the U.S. District Judge here, citing Combs' domestic violence as part of that justification for his continued detention. He called it a propensity for violence. This is also a quote here. The judge saying it is impossible for the defendant to demonstrate that he poses no danger to the community. Again, that as part of this decision not to grant him bail, to deny bail to Sean Diddy Combs. I want to go to our ABC News legal contributor, Brian Buckmeyer. Brian, you've been watching this case very closely. You've been inside the courtroom at times. So now that bail has been denied, Brian, what are the next steps?
So the next steps will be sentencing, and between today and whatever the sentencing date is, and we're waiting to hear what that is, Sean Combs will be visited by someone from the probation department, and they'll interview him, speak with Sean Combs, family members, anyone else that they may be directed to, and they'll create what's called a PSI, or pre-sentencing investigation. That information will be given to both the attorneys as well as the judge, and will help guide them in terms of a sentencing. Now, Bernardo had pointed out the sentencing guidelines that both parties have put forward. The defense saying that the sentence should be anywhere from 21 to 27 months. The government saying anywhere from 51 to 63 months. But that PSI will provide what they believe the sentencing guidelines will be. And then either side will try to argue, come sentencing, that there are either aggravating circumstances, the government will oppose those to go higher, or mitigating circumstances to go lower. And that's when we'll find a sentence. And of course, the potential of what's called victim impact statements, people who will testify or give testimony about the sentencing of Sean Combs.
Brian Buckmeyer, thank you. I want to go back to Aaron Katursky. Aaron, we know that sentencing hearing scheduled for the fall. Sean Diddy Combs has already been in custody for about 9 months now, and he's also facing dozens of civil lawsuits. What more does he have ahead of him before that hearing? We know, I think it's on October 3rd.
October 3rd at 10 a.m. is when Sean Combs is going to be sentenced for his conviction on 2 counts of transportation for the purposes of prostitution. Each of those counts carries a maximum penalty of up to 10 years. And so prosecutors pointed out in their letter to the judge his total exposure is 20 years in prison. And the judge today, Whit, said that Combs's propensity for violence was starkly depicted on that 2016 hotel security camera footage that may well factor into the judge's sentencing decisions. In the meantime, Sean Combs will continue to be incarcerated at MDC in Brooklyn, the federal jail in Brooklyn, where he's been since his arrest. This is at least the 3rd, possibly even the 4th time that bail has been denied, and he will have to fight those civil lawsuits, at least at the outset, from behind bars. With
Aaron Katursky, thank you, and the entire team. Again, the judge denying Sean Combs bail following that split verdict earlier today when the jury acquitted him of the most serious charges of racketeering and conspiracy and sex trafficking. But the jury did find him guilty on those 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. We're going to return you in just a moment here to regular programming. Our coverage does continue on ABC News Live and abcnews.com. Also, a programming note, an ABC News special report, Verdict, the Diddy Trial, airs tonight at 10 Eastern right here. And then I'll be back with our entire team for a full wrap-up on World News Tonight. I'm Whit Johnson in New York. Have a great day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
You've been watching an ABC News special report. The judge in the sex trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs denying bail for the rap mogul just hours after a jury acquitted him of the most serious offenses he had been facing. We're also learning that the judge has set a sentencing date for Friday, October 3rd, later this year. The judge cited Combs' domestic violence as part of the justification for his continued detention there. He called it a propensity for violence, saying that it is impossible for the defendant to demonstrate that he poses no danger to the community. The defendant's violence was starkly depicted in that 2016 Intercontinental video of him attacking then girlfriend Cassie Ventura. And I want to go to ABC News' Rena Roy, who was outside that courthouse in Lower Manhattan as this news trickled out. And Rena, what more can you tell us?
Well, Alex, the judge took the bench shortly after 5 p.m. and almost immediately he read out his decision. Prosecutors and the defense, they submitted their letters at 1 p.m., making their cases for both for and against his release here. And it appears that the judge sided with the prosecution. They attached a letter from celebrity stylist and Cassie Ventura's friend, Deontay Nash, who said that he also suffered violence at the hands of Combs, and urged the judge not to release him, saying that that would send a dangerous message. And Cassie Ventura's lawyer also told the judge that she felt that he would pose a danger to alleged victims like herself and the community as well. Now, as you pointed out, the judge said, quote, "It is impossible for the defendant to demonstrate that he poses no danger to the community." And he cited his domestic violence that we saw in this trial over and over as part of the justification for his decision here. And he said that he had a propensity for violence. And remember, this is something that the defense did not deny in this trial. They agreed that Combs can be violent. They agreed that Combs can be abusive. You see the images of that 2016 video on your screen there that has now become infamous. It was really a key part of this case. The jury saw it multiple times. It has been seen around the world on, news coverage and social media as well. So at this point, Combs will go back to MDC Brooklyn. That's where he's been held since September of last year when he was arrested by federal authorities. So he will be going back there until his sentencing date, which we have now learned is scheduled for October 3rd at 10 a.m., Alex.
Thank you for that, Rena. I want to go to ABC News contributor and trial attorney Brian Buckmeyer. And Brian, we're learning that as the judge made his ruling here denying Diddy's release, Combs, he appeared to look at his lawyers. As the judge read that decision, his head was largely down, though he did whisper to one of his attorneys. And, that's a stark difference from how he came into the courthouse, smiling and greeting supporters. But I'm curious, in your professional expertise, does this decision, does it surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me. In fact, I assumed that this judge would deny any request for bail. And I think, and again, I'm not at the table, but I understand, I know some of these defense attorneys, what probably happened was, like what we all do as defense attorneys, we tell our client, this is how we hope it goes. If it goes in our favor, then you're going to walk out. If it doesn't go in our favor, then here are the plans that we can try to make this work. And what I think Sean Combs is probably whispering to his attorneys and what they're listening to is, what's next? And what's possibly next for Sean Combs is what's called a writ of habeas corpus, where the defense will file a writ to go to a higher court, potentially the Second Circuit, and say that this judge erred in not providing bail for Sean Combs. I would not be surprised if the document is not being drafted now or shortly tomorrow morning, that they request to go to a higher court to try to get another bite of the apple for trying to release Sean Combs. It's the 4th of July weekend, so it might be difficult, but maybe Monday or Tuesday, they'll try to set something up in the near future.
Well, and I want to go to ABC News legal contributor and criminal defense attorney Bernardo Villalona. Bernardo, we're just getting this new note from the district judge in this case. He did not weigh in on Combs' future sentencing, but did note that there is a wide divide, he said, between what the prosecution and defense attorneys have suggested for a sentence. Can you break down to us what is his exposure looking like here, and what are some of the guidelines there?
Yeah, so one thing that is definitely definite in terms that both sides do agree is that the maximum sentence as to each count is 10 years and that it can run consecutive up to 20 years. However, there's something that's called the criminal sentencing guideline recommendation. And in those recommendations, in that guideline, it takes into account the transportation to engage in prostitution, the acts that took place, how many of them took place, how did it take place, and who was involved in those acts. And for each of those items that were taken into consideration, points are assigned to them. So depending on how many points are assigned to each of those acts, that would determine the range, the sentencing guideline range that Sean Combs could face. Look, in the end, the Department of Probation is going to do their independent calculation as to what the guidelines are, and the judge is going to take his cue from the Department of Probation. And ultimately, ultimately, at the time of sentencing, there will be a hearing to determine what are those guidelines. And if there's any case where the guidelines make a difference, it's going to be this case, for the reason being that there's no mandatory minimum. And I am sure that Judge Subramanian is not going to look to go below the guidelines in handing out a sentence to Sean Combs, because this is not your typical transportation to engage in prostitution. Prime example, when the prosecution put up a picture of 27 men that were hired to engage in sexual acts with either Jade or Cassie, or sometimes with the both of them sharing the same men at different occasions.
Well, and Bernardo, one other thing that we're seeing from one of Diddy's attorneys, they're asking for him to be sentenced as soon as possible. Why is that?
Because they believe in their mind that Sean Combs would be eligible for a lesser sentence, that the judge will give him a lesser sentence than whatever the guidelines recommend. And it is in the prerogative of the judge to give a below guideline sentence, which could equal out to Sean Combs being released as soon as the date of sentence. So that's why they are asking for an immediate sentencing date. But what's going to be the bump in the road is how long the Department of Probation takes in interviewing Sean Combs and conducting their independent investigation for this pre-sentence report. This pre-sentence report is not going to be 2 or 3 pages. We are talking about over 10 or 20 pages that this report is going to encompass, that's going to take into account the life of Sean Combs from when he was born up until the day of sentencing, his actions in custody, what he has been done or even accused of doing, his prior bad acts, interviews with family members, interviews with other people, interviews with the victims of this case. All of that is going to be encompassed into this report that ultimately will be a recommendation for this judge to make the ultimate decision as to what should be the sentence in determining deterrence, accountability, and rehabilitation for Sean Combs for these 2 acts that he's been found guilty of.
Well, Bernardo, I appreciate that breakdown, and if you're able to, I'd love for you to stick around. But I want to go to jury consultant Ross Suter, who's with us right now. And Ross, listen, we talk about these 8 men and 4 women that held the fate of Sean Diddy Combs' life in their hands, essentially. Something that was a point that was made earlier today in our coverage was that oftentimes, we look at the race or sex of a jury, but oftentimes, the more consequential question is the age in what we're looking for here, in terms of sentences that are handed down. What do you make of where the jury stood with this verdict?
Well, I do believe that they had a pretty diverse jury pool. You could see that they, I think it was the prostitution claims in those issues were definitely clear to them, and they struggled a little bit more with the allegations of the more abstract legal concepts. But they have a very diverse jury makeup, different backgrounds, ethnicities, ages, and it's why it's difficult to read the tea leaves and to know what a jury panel is going to do ultimately at the end of the day. We want to get a sense of what themes, what cases, or what storylines and whatnot will actually resonate with jurors, or with the greatest amount of jurors, so that they're going to be able to see whomever's side of the story, whether it's the prosecution or the defense.
Yeah. Ross, I really appreciate that. And if you don't mind sticking around for a bit, but I wanted to go to ABC News contributor and senior entertainment reporter for ESPN's Anscape, Kelly Carter, who's been following this along with us. And Kelly, one of the things that struck me the most about the last half hour, if you will, the notes that we're getting out of the courtroom, we're hearing about Diddy with his head down. They say that he's occasionally been whispering to his attorney, but his head's been down. It also appears that he's largely motionless at the counsel table right now, according to the latest note from our team inside there. And that's a stark departure from how he entered, smiling and greeting supporters, and also how he's known as a personality. I mean, this is an individual who is built a brand essentially around being the life of the party, and at one point it even temporarily changed his name to Love, because he always had this magnetic smile. But this is quite the change.
Yeah, this is a stark difference from the kind of charismatic person, as you really accurately described, that we've come to know, for the last 30 years. I mean, imagine being the person who is known for getting the party started, essentially, in whatever room or space he's in, finding themselves under the weight of all of these charges and now having to deal with, the guilty verdict on 2 of those charges and trying to figure out what the immediate future looks like for him. It's a stark difference from who we have come to know. And that really, I think, in a lot of ways gives definition and really kind of illustrates exactly, where his frame of mind is right now, kind of having that understanding that he's not, in fact, going home today after a long summer of a trial and kind of everything being aired out for better or for worse. So I think it's just another kind of thing that we're going to be talking about, because this is just so different from what we normally know of him.
Yeah, no, well put. And I know Rena Roy is still outside the courthouse there. And Rena, as we're learning more about what the judge has told Diddy's defense team, he said that this detention is in part because of the argument used by his lawyers to secure his partial acquittal, that Combs engaged in domestic violence but not in sex trafficking. And he said that, from the outset, the defense team said that in this case, it did have violence.
Yeah, this is something, Alex, that we heard over and over in this trial from defense attorneys. They said, hey, Sean Combs may be a jerk, he may be an abuser, he may be guilty of domestic violence, but that's not what this case is about. We heard them say that to the jury over and over, and that was their defense strategy. And now it seems the judge is bringing that right back to them today. As you said, he said full-throatedly in your closing argument, told the jury that there was violence here, and domestic violence is violence, the judge said. You said this was a case that did have violence. So as to the basic question of violence, you conceded that in your closing. So he brought that right back to defense attorneys today before Sean Combs heads back to that prison cell.
All right. Rena, Kelly, Brian, and Ross, thank you all. And the other trial that we've been monitoring, Brian Kohberger, the suspect in the King Road murders, has admitted to killing 4 University of Idaho students in November of 2022. Kohberger officially pleading guilty to all 4 counts of murder in a court hearing today, sparing him from the death penalty.
Did you, on November 13th, 2022, in Latah County, state of Idaho, kill and murder Madison Mogen, a human being?
Yes.
Did you, on or about that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Kaylee Gonzalez, a human being?
Yes.
And did you, on that same date in Moscow, Idaho, kill and murder Xana Kernodle, a human being?
Yes.
Did you kill and murder Ethan Chapin, a human being?
Yes.
As part of the plea deal, Kohberger will be sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences for murder and 10 years for burglary in the killings of Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, the 4 college students fatally stabbed inside of their off-campus house in the small town of Moscow, Idaho. The victims' loved ones were inside the courtroom today. One family telling ABC News that they support the plea agreements, but others expressing frustration over the deal. And switching gears here, severe storms on the move over parts of the country as tens of millions of Americans are getting ready to travel for the 4th of July